Okay, in terms of the cloud, it's growing in importance massively, and I guess there's a need alongside that for sort of corresponding observability solutions so that end users get a better understanding of what's going on with their cloud applications. Is that right?
Yes, that's exactly right. And essentially now when you're having growth of cloud application performance and cloud application in the cloud, is becoming, observability is becoming much more critical than ever before. What you have often is loosely cloud microservices. Developers can innovate faster with them. You have the rise of containers. With that, you have the rise of complexity, and you also have many moving elements. What we see, according to our State of Observability survey, is that the popularity of Kubernetes and microservices is skyrocketing. We see that 72% of correspondents said that they use containers, and microservices are used by about 49%. And what we also see that when you look at their current approach using traditional monitoring tools, majority of them are telling us that there are issues with us. So 80% of them are saying that legacy monitoring tools are not enough. And this is because we now see the explosion in telemetry, we see the explosion of high rates of change. So with this diverse stack, having observability is now more important than ever.
Okay, and in terms, I'm also guessing that maybe people, rather than just sort of incident detection, saying, something's happening, something's going wrong, people are looking as well in the sort of, particularly in the cloud environment, for sort of predictions of maybe what an incident's about to happen, so they can do something about it. And also in terms of more for the business, there's a lot of code changes, and maybe people are wanting to understand, what impact that may have before they actually go ahead with it. Is that right?
Yes, another very important aspect as the results of our survey is that according to 92% of our survey respondents, we see that observability usage leads to better and data-driven decision-making as well as business impact. What we see is because observability solutions collect and analyze the vast amount of data from application environments, from cloud, they can empower business decision makers with gold mine of business insights. So they can make better data-driven business decisions. And you mentioned prediction, right? Often, like in the past, we talked about incident resolution, incident prevention, but we are also moving beyond prediction into something called self-healing. More and more, I'm hearing the cool effect of self-healing. And let me give you an example. When it comes to Kubernetes pods, we have something called Tons Observability Horizontal Pod Adapter, which is very, very useful. It ties to Kubernetes HPA, Horizontal Pod Autoscaler. We have internal and external teams that are using it very widely, that with just a couple of lines of code, we have developers that can govern their services based on key metrics. That's really outstanding. By the time you have an alert, your HPA is very flexible so that it serves the alert by scaling up and down your clusters. So you don't need to do anything. We often see that SREs see an alert and automatically before they come to service that alert, it's actually resolved.
Okay, so I'm guessing you're describing, or it seems to be you describing potentially a sort of meeting of observability and a sort of DevOps culture. Is that a good way to describe what's going on?
Yes, that's very, very interesting that you tied kind of DevOps culture with observability. And one of the tenets of DevOps culture is ability to share insights. It's also ability to measure. So when you have shareable insights, overall, it leads to better decision making. So what we are seeing is, according to our State of Observability research, 85% of correspondents stated that the cloud services have much better availability if they have these shareable insights for all. And that's the basics of DevOps culture. When you have teams that are working together, your incident resolution times also is happening within seconds, right? And not just dev and ops and security teams, it's also business teams. So it's basically fostering this DevOps culture of sharing as well as accountability and measurement. Exactly.
And in terms of the cloud itself, I mean, in terms of the feedback you've had, whether from the survey or just sort of anecdotally with customers, what are the challenges that people are, with cloud applications in terms of understanding performance? I'm thinking things maybe, I don't know, complexity, multi-cloud environments. Are those, what are the sort of things going on there?
Yes, according to our research, the number one problem that's been reported is the lack of unified visibility across all environments. You mentioned multi-cloud environments, you mentioned microservices, Kubernetes. Also, it's very important that the unified visibility is shared according to 55%, 54% of correspondents. Also, for 40% of them, we found that many organizations are reporting there's a huge effort that's needed to maintain the tool sets, right? 27% stated that when they use legacy tooling or open source tooling, even though it's perceived as cost-free, it requires huge effort in maintaining these tools. Also important is ability to handle huge amount of metrics, huge amount of data coming from those tools. So scalability is also important for a fifth of those surveyed, that they can scale as their business grow. As you have cloud service that's growing, it's important to have adequate measurements. For instance, like today is the day deadline for many Americans to submit their taxes. So imagine that you're the company that's behind clouds, that's running that cloud service. You want to be able to scale it up and down with your traffic, with your demand. And that's where observability comes in. That's what's essential. Having visibility and ability to scale with the demand of your application is important.
And I mentioned earlier about the sort of frequency of sort of application releases to do with impacts of code change, but I'm guessing also that as people are releasing 2.0 and then 2.0.1 and all these kind of endless things, there's a lot more testing sort of, and therefore observability required in that sort of testing environment. And then as it gets into production, is that another issue for people?
It is also what people reported as very, very important. Kind of as you are releasing your application more frequently, you need to validate that impact, not only in tests, but in production and throughout the entire build pipeline. So when you have shorter time and more frequent more frequent deployment, you need instant validation. So imagine if you're releasing 100 times per day, right? If you're waiting for results for an hour, you're really like releasing again, and you don't know what the impact of that code is. And we have many examples of our customers that are releasing hundreds of times per day. For instance, I actually presented with VMware in Barcelona when we used to travel. They're releasing hundreds of times per day, and they're using a tool called Azure DevOps as they're pushing code through their pipeline. So they used to validate the code pushes manually. When they implemented observability, they are actually having automatic validation of the code pushes, and through each step in their pipeline. They monitor, for instance, HTTP 500 and error log rate. So it's completely handoff. They have automatic validation that's tied to an alert. And if something goes wrong, they can roll back. So that saves them hundreds of hours, depending on how often they push. That's where the industry is going. Automatic validation and instant results and automatic scaling back.
Okay, but I'm guessing they're potentially the exception rather than the rule at the moment. So if that's right, and therefore a lot of companies, they're not satisfied with their existing sort of cloud monitoring approach, tools, whatever. And are we looking, I mean, is there a genuine need from end users for a sort of new set of observability tools or one, sort of observability platform? Is that where we're at the moment?
Yes, you're right. There's observability is early. We see its popularity is growing. We see many forward-leaning companies behind cloud services like Yammer. But you're right. For more traditional enterprises, maybe even more larger enterprises, we see that they're using more traditional tooling. And some of the aspects that they are saying is that they're still not having visibility. For majority of them, even though those traditional tools are really, really popular, they're still grappling with kind of disjointed visibility for different teams, such as developers, ops, and other. Also, huge effort is there to maintain existing tool set, and kind of a lack of insights into Kubernetes usage, into cloud service usage is another one. So it's essentially something that everybody needs, and we're seeing growth in popularity.
And in terms, is part of the problem maybe that people are aware that they need to do something, but they've got quite a large estate of existing, monitoring solutions in various parts of the organization. And in an ideal world, they either get one solution that will replace all those, but the likelihood is it's not going to happen. So they therefore need something that is at least going to integrate with all the existing tools and sort of add value to that. How do you describe that sort of scenario?
Yeah, that's very interesting. The very surprising result from our survey is only 8% of people want to rip and replace. Majority of, and that's kind of gives you the kind of the validation of the API economy and integration across different tool sets. People just want to address gaps they have, and potentially down the road replace or integrate with existing tooling. So very few people want to just rip and replace their existing tooling. So the integration aspect is very, very important. So that's exactly right what you said. Mm-hmm.
And do you have a view, as you say? I mean, obviously rip and replace is potentially quite painful and an involved scenario, whereas it's much safer to kind of keep what you've got and maybe add a layer on top. But are people able to get sort of the full benefits of observability by hanging on to legacy kit, or as with so many other things, do you eventually have to say it's time to get rid of the legacy and go with the latest and neatest solution?
So in some cases, I mean, we see kind of the spectrum depending on where people are at their observability, maturity, adoption. Some people more, as I mentioned, cloud native organizations, they are quite forward. They just start with the latest and greatest. However, when you are a larger shop that has these tools in place, what we are seeing is the need to unify all those tools and kind of have ability to integrate with them and down the road replace. And that's the most common approach I'm seeing. I presented back in December with Kariba, the fintech company, and they have many different tools in place. Hybrid cloud environment. They have two public cloud, and they have VMware environment. For them, that approach to evolve and down the road replace was really something they found preferred. So spectrum, right? Depending on where organizations are. And that's where, tools that can integrate with those existing tools are really important. And this is where we see observability comes into play, with the ability to integrate across silos, not just teams, organizations, but also different tools, and ability to ingest different multiple at high scale data sets.
And in terms of the observability capabilities that are most valued, I mean, again, you sort of painted a picture. There's a quite wide spectrum of organizations there. So are there common sort of observability capabilities that they all desperately want, or does it very much depend on what kind of organization and where they are on their AIOPS journey, I guess?
Correct. Beyond what we discussed, beyond integration, which is number one, it's kind of a little bit surprising, because I always thought it's table stakes to integrate with existing tooling, but it's still number one requested item is to integrate. And we already mentioned that that's the way to cover visibility gaps. But ingesting data from diverse data sources, such as you have metrics, you have traces, you have multiple different data sources, is another one that's really important. And because we're my best guess is that we are within pandemic environment. Many people are working from home. What we are seeing is the rise, and it's in the third place, of digital experience monitoring, as well as the rise of synthetics. So that's really something that people are requesting. Ability to see full stack is another, like correlation across different data sources. For instance, when you're gathering metrics, you can actually see the business insights directly from the availability metrics. And then scaling. It's important to understand that people want their tools to be able to scale accordingly with the rise and popularity of their cloud services and their organizations. So those are some of the popular capabilities that we're seeing that people are asking for.
And in terms of, you've referenced in answering some of the questions, a couple of sort of customers or people you've been presenting with. Are you able to maybe share with us another example of where you've been able to help a customer on that sort of AIOPS observability journey?
Yes, we have many different customers, and some of the customers were, even though they're traditional organization, they actually very quickly adopted cloud native approaches. And I also presented in a couple of instances with Centrica Hive and behind IoT automation in UK. And there, what we uncovered is that not only they're monitoring infrastructure and applications, it's also those metrics are being used for business impact. Executives loves to see the real-time impact into how their platform is doing, how many connections there are. Another very popular company is a ride-sharing company here in the United States, for instance. They are also gathering real-time metrics about the rides, the passenger metrics, the driver metrics, the marketplace metrics, all in real time. Imagine if you're a company behind when you're ordering, food ordering dinner on a Friday evening, right? It's important also to highlight that for if you're a Friday evening and you're trying to make an order and the application is down, you need to be able to adjust to the volume of requests for that company. So ability to kind of ingest spiky traffic, ability to have wide swings in data volumes, in data shapes. This is what observability solutions offer, so that you can scale up and scale down the demand without having to worry about what's going to be the throughput of the day. That's very unique for cloud native observability solutions. So there are many different examples as well. Also, we have internal customers of VMware, many companies that through acquisition or internal teams are using observability. Another one is Carbon Black, and they are using us internally as part of VMware for auto-scaling, ability to do triage, ability to do that self-healing. So that's very popular. We kind of have many teams that are drinking our own champagne. My VMware, Carbon Black, cloud services. So many teams are jumping on the bandwagon of observability as well.
Okay, and I know the research, I think sort of produced a set of recommendations when it comes to people who are evaluating a potential observability. So are you able to, is there again a standard sort of checklist when people are, because I mean, don't need to tell you, the AIOPS landscape is a very complicated one. Lots of vendors coming at it from slightly different angles. So what are the sort of common recommendations as to what people need to look for, when they are evaluating these kind of solutions?
Yeah, you're right. It's a growing space, and we see many not only just established vendors like us, but many new startups coming into the space, and it's sometimes hard to cut through the noise. So there are a couple of recommendations. Even though you can gather all this data, right? Do you really want to have everything sent to you all the time? So I'd recommend, and we've seen from many customers, they first start adding everything, and they're realizing, well, during the regular monitoring day to day, I may not need to have the frequency of the metrics, but if I'm seeing an incident, then I may have automatically adjust my frequency of data collection. That's another aspect that people are often, so adjust your frequency of collection as you are encountering more kind of incidents. Some people call this wartime versus peacetime. Some people call this monitoring versus troubleshooting, but that's another aspect. Evaluate the growth, the planned growth of your cloud services, whether you're planning to go into microservices realm, and evaluate what is projected growth of your containers. So do you need to change your solution mid-flight, right? What works for you day one, will that work for you, after you have success, or after you have much bigger demand for your cloud service? So that's really something that how you grow and how you scale, it's important. Also think about your tooling across teams and projects. Are you really adopting the AIOPS culture? And are you using different teams for different tools? And how long does it take for an incident to be resolved? So there is an opportunity to unify those silos, those solutions, and down the road, as you mentioned before, potentially retire some of the legacy solutions. Are your teams pushing code to production quarterly or daily or weekly? Maybe for like more monolithic application, you don't need to go to observability, and your current tooling is just enough. But if you're transforming, modernizing your applications, then pushing code to production frequently requires rethinking of observability approaches. And also, do your teams need to provide insight for line of business, for business stakeholders, and evaluate if you need, how long does it take for all these insights to come through the pipeline? And again, another opportunity to start looking into implementing observability, such as times observability.
Okay, and maybe just one final thing, as it alluded to the fact there's lots of different sort of approaches to AIOPS and observability. Do you have any thoughts as to how the market might develop over, because I mean, I say we've got AIOPS pure play, you've got, I think, value stream management, which I know is slightly different, more DevOps. You mentioned digital experience monitoring, and then you've obviously got traditional things like network operations. I mean, there seems to be an ops for almost every part of the IT stack these days. But just any thoughts, and just finally, I read somewhere the other day, digital operations management sounds a very grand title. Is that where we're ultimately going to end up? Or just some thoughts as to where it might end up in 12 or 18 months time.
This is a very fashionable domain. You have the abbreviation of the day, if you will. I've been in this domain for quite many years, and so a couple of items that we are also seeing kind of emerging, and AIOPS is one of them. When you look into the domain of open telemetry and distributed tracing, we're seeing quite high popularity of implementing open source and open telemetry. So that's one, and I think we're going to see from early adoption now in nascent to kind of in the 5 years from now, everybody will be probably adopting. The reason why I'm mentioning that, when you tie open telemetry and standard-based approaches to tracing with techniques such as machine learning and AIOPS, first, you're collecting millions and millions of traces and metrics. Understanding them and isolating them humanly, like with your SRE or your operator or developer, it's very hard. You need augmentation and assisted methods by machine learning, so that machine learning algorithms can surface potential problematic areas within your microservices and your insights, so that those type of tools can help humans to find the needle in the haystack, to identify the trace. Imagine you have a VIP customer using a code, and that code is erroring out to order something, right? So in order for you to identify where's the problem, you need ML algorithms to assist you in identifying that issue. So we are going to see more and more of those insights, assisted insights by AIOPS and machine learning. Another aspect is popularity of DevSecOps, and beyond DevOps, as you're moving security more earlier in the development cycles, not just defining security as an afterthought and tying something like observability in the production. It's important also tying into early in the development cycle, so you can identify what are the metrics that we are going to measure. That will give me security information, not only in the production, but throughout the development cycle, and as you indicated, throughout the test, throughout the deployment. So intersection of observability with DevSecOps popularity, I only expect that to grow. So that's some of the thoughts about predicting the future.
No, that's brilliant. I appreciate that. I mean, it's been great to chat to you. So Stella, thanks very much indeed for your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.